Welcome to Green Connections, where we help you live green, work green, and earn green. Find us online on greenconnectionsradio.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at GCM_DC, or follow me, Joan Michelson, at Joan Michelson on Twitter. At the turn of a new year, all these reports come out about trends and forecasts, and we get a snapshot of where we've been spending our time and money and what those patterns say about us. They hold up a mirror of sorts to our purchasing behaviors, to our choices, to our priorities. And by we, I mean all of us, you, me, consumers, companies, and government. They're always enlightening. They show us what drives our decisions. Is it money? Is it making a difference? What kind of making a difference? Is it public opinion? Is it our idea of success or how we're rewarded? Private companies have shareholders and are accountable to all of them, whoever buys their product, maybe even the stock market if they're publicly traded. Government officials want to get reelected or help their bosses get reelected. And individuals want to fulfill their financial and personal goals. So we all have our motivations. In the energy and sustainability world, probably the most respected report is the State of Green Business Report by Green Biz, the leader in reporting and events on green business for many years now, I guess. We'll find out. I think it's probably 15 or so. And we're pleased that Joel Makower, the chair and executive editor of Green Biz, is a regular contributor to Green Connections and joins us today to talk about their 2014 State of Green Business Report. Welcome back to Green Connections, Joel.
Thanks, Joan.
And by the way, thanks again for having me host Sidebar, the live stream of your terrific Verge San Francisco conference a few months ago. That was really great fun.
It was great fun having you there.
Thank you. So first off, tell us a little bit about how the trends were derived. How did you decide what the trends were?
Well, they come from, us squinting our eyes and looking at, sort of shapes and where the world's going, and what we see in our work, not just as reporters, not just as event conveners, but also as the host of a membership group of sustainability executives, about 80 of them from very big companies that we bring together 3 times a year for 24 hours to listen to what they're thinking about and struggling with and where they see the world going. So it's all of that together and just our intuition that leads to the trend.
Pick out the top 3 that you think are the real major trends.
I don't know that there's a top 3 out of the top 10 because they're all top. But let me pick a few of them. One has to do with chemical transparency, which is about companies being, particularly consumer product companies, being pressured and increasingly voluntarily coming forth with full disclosure of the ingredients in their products. What's in household cleaners, what's in cosmetics, what's in other personal care products.
Well, let me just address that for a second, because 2 things. First of all, I think some of this started with things like the movement against monosodium glutamate and some of the food additives that were considered toxic, that those movements started 10 plus years ago in many cases. And also, I did a story a while ago on The Good Guide. It's an app for your phone where you can scan the barcode off a product and it gives you a rating on that product. It rates the company's social responsibility as well as the health and environment ratings of the product. And it tells you whether those fancy named chemicals are benign or really something that you want to stay away from. I will tell you that I've freaked out a few store clerks and managers when I've gone into stores and scanned products. They're like, what are you taking a picture of our product for? It's pretty funny.
So we talk about Good Guide in this, and I think the key thing is that it's natural things that you put in your body, like food. You want to certainly know what that is, but that hasn't been the case with things that you put on your body or put in your breathable space of your home, like cleaning products. And I think that's where this trend is going. It's going beyond food.
Okay. Are the drivers of this the consumer, or are they regulatory forces, or are they economics? I mean, are people not buying these products anymore? I
think it's in the form of the advocates for consumers, which are the NGOs, the nonprofit advocacy groups that have been pressing companies to disclose and also pressing to get some of these things out of products like triclosan is a good example. It turns out that the active ingredient is a chemical that has potential to degrade in water treatments in rivers and lakes and streams, and produces dioxins, which are cancer-causing. And so,
okay, water is huge. I mean, water is coming to light as a giant issue, and you mentioned it a bit in reference to triclosan, but I see water as a huge thing, and I think it's something that is raising its head also because it's so scary. It cuts to the core of survivability, and people don't want to necessarily deal with it because of that. It's very frightening to think of not having water.
Sure. The specific trend we talk about is water becoming more and more a risk factor for companies because as companies have operations in dozens or scores or even 100 or more countries, they're finding that they're doing business in more and more water-stressed areas as populations growing, particularly in developing countries, tapping the water supply, the groundwater, and making it more vulnerable to pollution. And companies are finding that that's becoming a choke point, a commodity without which, just like we can't survive, companies can't survive without water. And it doesn't. You don't necessarily need to be a water-intensive company like a brewery or a computer chip manufacturer, which uses a lot of water. You don't need to be one of those businesses to be vulnerable. Just the fact that water is used in power plants, coal, nuclear, natural gas power plants, and there have already been examples where droughts have forced power companies, particularly in Europe, to shut down the power plants, and in China as well. There's just not enough water to run a power plant. All of a sudden, there's no electricity, and some of the beverage companies, Coke, Pepsi, have had severe problems in countries like India, where they were alleged to have contributed benzene to the groundwater, and whether they did or not is irrelevant because they're a big multinational in a community where there's lots of farmers and households. The locals said, you're out of here. And they basically, in one case, burned the plant to the ground. And so that's a huge reputational problem when companies, basically have what's called their social license to operate revoked.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you raise a good point that I just want to capture here for a moment. Your universe, the universe that GreenBiz focuses on, are large companies. These are not, you have some small startups. Obviously, you did a great showcase of many of them at Verge. But your focus for this report is really big companies, correct?
Well, that's who we're measuring. Yeah, that's our general audience for GreenBiz. And so I think that's safe to say.
What's one or two of your trends that are really going to drive the others?
One that's been starting to prove out is around energy storage, the fact that battery storage to store renewable energies for times when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. That becomes a game changer, not just for renewable energy, but for companies that all of a sudden first of all, can utilize renewable power more reliably, but it's also going to make companies more resilient, which is to say, when there are outages, whether they're from drought that shuts down the power plant or cyber or physical terrorism on a plant or just a stress on the grid, companies won't have to shut down. So by having that on-site storage and just being more independent, it really does change the game.
So just in closing, I have one more question for you, and that is, how seriously are companies taking, quote, corporate social responsibility? The many CSR folks I've talked to don't have a budget, or they have a very small one. They're often part of the foundation or related to the foundation. So their impact is really constrained. It seems to me that they have more influence than direct impact. What's your take on that?
What's evident from the stories that we cover every day on GreenBiz is that these guys are having an effect. And as I sit with them several times a year and listen to their stories, they're doing God's work and they're effective at it. They just don't do it. They just don't have a lot of money to pour into it, but they can be very effective at moving big companies down this path. So I'm very encouraged by all that.
What is behind them that's driving it? Are the companies seeing that the economics work, or again, does it go back to the advocates that you were talking about, the NGOs?
Every company is different. Some companies are being driven by competitors. Their customers expect them to do it, and FedEx and UPS both try to outgreen the other, Ford and GM, HP and Dell. Sometimes it's driven by protesters, advocates, activists. Sometimes it's driven by regulations or fear of regulations, like with e-waste. If we don't solve the problem ourselves, the government will force us to do it a certain way. Sometimes it's driven by the need to attract and retain talent, particularly millennials. We see that a lot in the tech world. Sometimes it's driven by culture of innovation. This is how we're going to get to new products and services, and sometimes whole new business models, and so on, and leadership and everything else. It's usually not any one of those things. It's some combination, but each company has a different mix of those, and most of this stuff is being driven for sound business reasons, not simply to green up your reputation. In fact, we've talked about this before and can talk about it another time. Companies are doing a lot more than they're talking about. They actually don't like to talk about this stuff, and they just like to do it.
Yes, I agree with that completely. And well, thank you so much, Joel, and thank you for the report. We will post the link to your report also on greenconnectionsradio.com. And I look forward to hearing more about what corporate sustainability folks are doing down the line. Thanks again for joining us on Green Connections.
It's my pleasure, Joan. Take care.
Thank you, you too. So here's what I hear Joel Makower saying is that advocates are making a difference, regulations are making a difference, and our choices are making a difference. Consumer demands are making a difference, and mechanisms and technology and gadgets like the Good Guide are making a difference. What's really stark to me is the difference between the Green Biz report and ARPA-E. The Green Biz report seems to reflect action, but more incremental action and less hit it out of the park action, more reactive, reacting to pressures and trying to be a little bit ahead of the curve, but not really taking it on in a big way. ARPA-E, on the other hand, is supercharging our energy revolution. There are a few things they have in common, of course. They both emphasized collaboration. Working with your strategic partners is key. Working with your customers or your stakeholders is key. Another one that they have in common, of course, is energy storage. Energy storage was a huge issue at ARPA-E and is a huge issue in the Green Biz report. Whatever kind of energy we're going to have going forward, whether it comes from nuclear, natural gas, any other kind of petroleum-based product, solar, wind, biofuels, they all require some sort of storage. All of energy roads lead to storage, so that's huge. And transparency. Transparency is very interesting. I was delighted to hear that that's increased. And again, I think that's due to pressure. Pressure from regulations, pressure from advocates, and pressure from us consumers. Water is the other fourth one that I'll say is really hugely common at both ARPA-E and in the Green Biz report. Water is basic, as Joel said, for companies as well as it is for communities and people. And companies are very aware of the risk both to their processes of staying in business, but also their reputational risk. I mean, to have the Coca-Cola plant that he described being burned down because they were perceived, it wasn't even proven, to be perceived as contaminating the water. That's pretty extraordinary. So what I heard Joel say is that companies are doing a lot behind the scenes, which is very encouraging, and that all of these trends that he talked about, all 10 trends, are very much connected, and I agree with that. They all intersect, obviously. So what do you see? What trends do you see? How is your company going green? How is your city going green? Does your company have an employee engagement program around sustainability? Is it doing work for energy reduction? Is it trying to conserve water? Tell us on Twitter at GCM_DC or at Joan Michelson at mine, or post it to us on our Facebook page, or email it to us at info@greenconnectionsradio.com. And by the way, speaking of surveys, we at Green Connections are conducting our own brief survey as well on jobs and economic opportunities in the green industry. So please go to our website, take our survey too. It'll take you 5 minutes, or ask us for it on Twitter. Just send me post your request to me at Joan Michelson, or email us at info@greenconnectionsradio.com, and tell us your thoughts and take our survey. And you can also look at the Green Biz State of Green Business Report 2014. Thanks so much for joining us. Follow us again on greenconnectionsradio.com, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Capital Audio Post, your one-stop shop for your post-production needs. 703-712-8757.
Our services include video editing, sound design, sound mixing, ISDN recording, and many other media-related services.
Let us finish your project no matter where you are, across the U.S. or across the world. Go to www.capitalaudiopost.com. Call us at 703-712-8757.
Let us know how we can help you finish your production.